Alright, so now let's solve our question number 5, which was on the sampling method that we have. Okay, so I taught all these sampling methods that you can see here. Okay, so we are going to use this question here to discuss how we can find a sample using all these methods there that I've listed. Okay, so we are going to start from the simple method. Okay, the simple random sampling method. We are going to go to the stratified. We look at the clustered method. Okay, and then we look at the systematic sampling method. Okay, so let's read the question and then understand and then try to solve it. Okay, so the question here, they're saying 300 workers are to be selected from a total of 6,000 workers. Okay, so 2,500 workers are from the Ministry of Education, 1,800 are from the Ministry of Health, and then 1,200 are from the Ministry of Sports, and 500 are from the Ministry of what? Mines. So now the question is, explain how the sample can be made using a simple random sampling. Okay, so let's go through the simple random sampling. Okay, so the simple random sampling, we said this is a sampling method, okay, where each worker or each item that is being considered, okay, has an equal chance of being selected regardless of the class where they belong to. So in this case, we are going to say the class are the ministries. Okay, so regardless of the ministry that they belong to, they will have an equal chance of being selected in this sample. Okay, so we want to select a sample of 300 workers. Okay, and then we've been given that 2500 are from the Ministry of Education. Okay, and then we have that 1800 are from the Ministry of Health, and then 1200 are from the Ministry of Sports, and then we have 500, okay, from the Ministry of what? Mines. So when we add all these numbers, 500 plus this number plus 1800 plus 1200, we are going to get the total number of workers, which is what? 600 there. So now, how do we use this simple random sampling method? Okay, so what we are going to do is that we are going to assign a number to all these 600 workers that we have. Okay, so all those 600 workers, we are going to give them a number, okay, a unique number. So let's name them 1 to 6,000. Okay, so for example, the first worker is 1, the second one is 2, just like that. Okay, so these are our workers here: 6, 10, 11. Okay, we go all the way up to what? Worker 6,000, like that. Okay, and then once you assign a unique number to those workers, okay, we are going to use a random number generator, okay, to pick the first 30 workers from that sample. Okay, so let's say we use a random generator here. Maybe this is a random generator. Okay, so you give all those workers these unique numbers, and then you tell them to write their numbers on a paper. Okay, and then you put all those papers, 6,000 of them, you put them in this box. Okay, we put them in this box, and then what are we going to do? We are going to shake this box. Okay, you shake the box, shuku shuku shuku. Okay, after you shake yeah, after you shake the box, okay, you are going to randomly select what? 300 workers. Okay, so you just open the box after you shake it, and then you start picking randomly, okay, the tuma papers. So maybe you pick 1, you pick 5, you pick 17, you pick worker 20, you pick worker 99, you pick worker 1000. Okay, so you pick the first 300 workers depending on their what? Their unique numbers that you assigned to them. Okay, so that's how we can obtain a sample of 300 workers when we are using what? This random sampling method there. Okay, so when such a question comes, just explain whatever I've explained here. So the first step, okay, is to assign all those workers that you have, in this case we are these 6,000 workers, okay, assign them a different number. Okay, it can also be letters, but letters are limited. Okay, the letters are limited because um, we only have A to Z. Okay, so the best one is to use the numbers. So you assign unique numbers to all the elements that you are considering. In this case we are considering the workers. Okay, and then you put them in a random generator. Okay, so it can be a box like I did here, or it can be a hat, or anywhere, okay, where you can just mix those papers that they will write their names on. Okay, and then after that you just pick the first 300 workers from this box. So those 300 workers, they are the ones that are going to be in your sample. Okay, so if you use that method, then you've used simple random sampling method. All right, and then let's go to the second one there. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, guys. Okay, so let's go to the second one, which is stratified. Okay, let's go to the second one, which is stratified. So how do you pick a sample of 300 people, okay, using stratified random sampling? Okay, or maybe before we go to stratified, let me talk about the advantage and the disadvantage of using this simple random sampling. Okay, so the advantage is that it's simple, okay, to choose the workers. It's simple and it's unbiased, okay. And then the disadvantage is that it does not ensure proportional representation from each ministry. So imagine you have these 6,000 workers, and then you want to pick 300, okay, and then you use this simple random sampling, and then you pick all these 300. You just pick them from the Ministry of Education. Okay, it means your selection here won't be representative. Okay, you just get workers from the Ministry of Health, and that's all. Okay, so that's one of the disadvantage of simple random sampling. And then now let's talk about the stratified random sampling. Okay, so the stratified random sampling, okay, divides the population into groups. Okay, and these groups we call them strata. Okay, so divides the data into groups that we call as strata. So these strata are just smaller groups from the total number of workers that we've been given here, okay, based on their characteristics. Okay, so in this case we are going to pick that characteristic to be the ministry. Okay, we are going to say 2500. Okay, we know that this is from education. 1800, this is from health. And then we have 1200, we know that this is from sports. And then we have 500, and we know that this is from what? Mines. Okay, so we are going to group these workers in their respective ministries like I have done here. Okay, remember in our sample we want to choose 300 workers. Okay, so what are we going to do in order to choose these 300 workers? Okay, we are going to find a proportion of the workers to pick from each ministry. Okay, we are going to find a proportion of workers to pick from each ministry. So how are we going to do that? Okay, to find that proportion, you are going to divide, okay, the number of workers in that ministry divided by the total number of workers if you add all the workers from the other ministry, and then we are going to multiply that fraction by 300. Okay, so if we are considering the education there, the education ministry, we are going to say the proportion for education is just going to be equals to, okay, we have 2500 workers from education, so we're going to divide this by the total number, which is what? 6,000, like that. Okay, and then we're going to multiply this fraction here by the number of workers that should be in this sample. So we're going to multiply by 300. Okay, so if we multiply this by 300, we are going to get 125 workers. Okay, so it means that when we are selecting these 300 workers, okay, 125 should be from the Ministry of what? Education. What about the proportion from the Ministry of Health? So we are going to do the same. We're going to get 1800 divided by 6000, then multiplied by 300. Okay, so when you multiply this, we are going to get 90 workers. Okay, so 90 workers of the 300 should be from the Ministry of Health. Okay, what about the proportion from the Ministry of Sports? We are going to divide 200 divided by 6000 there. Okay, then we are going to multiply by 300. So here we are going to find that we have 60 workers. Okay, so 60 workers of the 300 should be from the Ministry of what? Sports. Okay, and then the last one, the proportion from the Ministry of Mines is going to be equals to 500 divided by, we have 6000 here, then multiplied by 300. Okay, so when we multiply this, what are we going to get? Okay, so according to my calculator, we are getting 25 workers. Okay, so that's how stratified sampling works. Okay, so you get a proportion from each group that you have. In this case, we are using what? The ministries. Okay, so it means that we are going to pick 125 workers from the Ministry of Education, 90 from the Ministry of Health, 60 from the Ministry of Sports, and 25 from the Ministry of what? Mines. Okay, so now how do you pick these 125, 90, 60, and 25? Okay, you pick these by using random sampling method, and I taught you how to do that, right? So you're going to put these 25 100 workers from the Ministry of Education, okay, give them a unique number from 1 up to 2500, okay, and then get the tuma papers, put them in the box, shook, okay, and then you pick the first 125 workers there. Okay, and then for these ones, for Ministry of Health, you are going to do the same. Okay, you give them unique numbers from 1 to, how many did we have in the Ministry of Health? Okay, we had 1800. Okay, so you give all these numbers, okay, from 1 up to 1800 there. Okay, and then once you get those numbers, you put them in a random generator. Okay, in the random generator, you pick the first 90 workers. Okay, even this one here, you're going to do the same. Even this, you're going to do the same. Okay, so by the end, once you do a random sampling on the Ministry of Education, random sampling on this, random sampling on this, and random sampling on the Ministry of Mines, you end up with your what? Your desired sample, which will be 300 what? Workers. Alright, so that's how you use the stratified sampling method. Okay, so any questions there before we go to the clustered? Okay, so we can talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of this method. Okay, so one advantage is that it ensures proportional representation. Okay, as you can see, we are getting workers from each ministry that we've been given there. Okay, so that's the advantage. The data, the sample that you're going to collect will be representative of the entire population. Okay, because you have workers from each ministry, so that's a good thing. Okay, so that's an advantage. Okay, and then the disadvantage is that it may require you to know the group size of each ministry there. Okay, so now imagine if you have 100 of groups to consider. Okay, it will be very bad to use stratified sampling. Okay, so that can be a disadvantage. Alright, so now let's look at the clustered method. Okay, let's look at the clustered method. Okay, so on the clustered method, we also divide the sample into clusters. Okay, so clusters are just groups. Okay, so we're going to divide these total 6000 workers, okay, into groups. Alright, so on this data here, we already have the group, so we are just going to say Ministry of Education, we have 2500. Okay, Ministry of Health, we have what? 1800. And then Ministry of Sports, okay, we have so sports we have 1200, and then Ministry of Mines we have what, 500. Okay, so this is the first step under clustered sampling. You divide your population into clusters like that. Okay, so um once you divide your population into these clusters here, okay, you are going to randomly select, okay, some of these clusters. Okay, we're going to randomly select some of these clusters. So maybe you have four papers here. So the first paper, there is E, meaning from Ministry of Education. You have the second paper, there is H, Ministry of Health. You have the other paper, maybe S, Ministry of Sports, and then the other paper, Ministry of Mines. So you're going to have these to my four papers. Okay, so you get these four papers, you put them in a box like that. Okay, and then you do your shook. Okay, so after you shake them, you select maybe two. Okay, you select two samples from this box here. Okay, so for example, maybe you get the cluster for Ministry of Education, and then you get the cluster for what, Ministry of Health. Okay, so what you are going to do is that you are going to select all the members, okay, in these two clusters that you've randomly selected to be in the sample. Okay, so someone might be wondering because here we want the sample to have 300, but this education guy has 2500. Even this health here has 1000 what, 800 there. Okay, so if the number exceeds, okay, if the workers that you have in these two ministries exceed the number that you are looking for, okay, then you just have to use random sampling on these two clusters that you've selected. Okay, so you get your workers from the Ministry of Education, and then you get your workers from the Ministry of Health. Okay, and then you use random sampling to select. Okay, so I taught you how to do the random sampling. Okay, so the most important thing here is first of all to divide, okay, the workers into clusters based on their, in this case we are considering the ministries. Okay, but you can have any other characteristics that you are considering, maybe based on their location where they're staying. Okay, so maybe we have Lusaka province, we have Copper Belt, all the 10 provinces in Zambia. Okay, and then once you divide them into those clusters, okay, you do a random sample. Okay, a random sampling of those clusters. Okay, so maybe you pick Lusaka, you pick Eastern, you pick Copper Belt. Okay, and then from these three clusters that you've selected, you're going to select all the members, okay, in those clusters. But if the members in those clusters, okay, are exceeding the number that you want, okay, you are going to do random sampling on these clusters that you've selected. Okay, so any questions there? Any questions there, guys? Okay, so one of the disadvantages of the clustered method is that it may introduce biasness. Okay, if the clusters are not representative of the entire population. Okay, so imagine in your random sampling you just decide to pick maybe Ministry of Health. Okay, so it means all these workers that you're going to pick will just be from the Ministry of Health. Okay, and that is not representative of the entire population. Alright, so that's clustered sampling for you. And then now let's look at the last one, okay, which is what they like to bring in your exam questions. Okay, so they like to bring this question here. So let's look at systematic sampling. Okay, so systematic sampling, they like it, and it is the easiest. Okay, so in systematic sampling, workers, okay, or whatever you are considering, are selected at regular intervals from a list of the entire population. Okay, so the first step under systematic sampling, okay, is to arrange, okay, or let me say assign. Okay, the first step is to assign, okay, a unique, okay, to assign a unique label, okay, on all the members in the population. Okay, so for example here um, we have 6,000 workers here, so we are going to assign a unique label to all these 6,000 what workers. So we can say the labels are numbers. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we go on just like that until we reach what? 6,000 workers, like that. So we have assigned all those workers with different numbers, okay, from 1 to 6,000. And then what are we going to do now? Okay, we are going to calculate the interval. Okay, remember I said in systematic sampling, samples are selected at regular intervals. Okay, so now we are going to calculate the interval, okay, at which we are going to be selecting these people. Okay, so how do you calculate the interval? So you say interval is equals to, okay, the total members in the population. In this case it is 6,000. Okay, and then you say divided by the total elements in the sample. Okay, so we are selecting a sample of 300 workers here, so we divide by 300. Okay, so the one that should be on top there should be the number of the total workers or the total elements in the sample, and then the one that should divide there should be the total this one here on top should be the total elements in the population. Okay, and then the one that is dividing there should be the total elements in the what? In the sample. Okay, so you can divide this. So 0 0 0 0 and then 3 into 60, you're going to get 20. Okay, so this 20 here will be our interval that we are going to be using to select people from that population here. So remember, we've assigned this population different or unique numbers from 1 up to 6,000. Okay, and then we have calculated 20 to be our interval. Okay, so what are we going to do now to select a sample of 300 there? Okay, we are going to select the first worker at random. Okay, we are going to select only the first worker at random. So maybe if I come to this entire population, okay, I select my first worker as worker number 15. Okay, so once you select your first worker as 15, all the workers that are going to be following here, they will have to follow this interval. Okay, so if your first worker is at 15, then your next one should be at position this 15 plus 20. Okay, so 15 plus 20, we are going to have is it 35? Okay, from 35 we are going to have plus 20, which will be 55. Okay, from 55 you are just going to continue adding. Okay, from 55 we are going to go to 75. From 75 you're going to go 95. Okay, so just like that until you have 300 workers in this sample that you are what? You are collecting. Okay, so that's how we do a systematic random what? Sampling. Okay, so the first step, assign each member a unique number. Second step, find the interval by dividing the number of elements in the population divided by the number of elements in the sample. After you find your interval, okay, select the first worker here or the first element from this population at random. Okay, so it can be any number. So in this case, let's say our first worker was 15. Okay, and then the rest of the workers in this sample will be obtained at this interval here. So just add 15 plus 20. It means the next one that you're going to select is worker 35. Then you're going to select worker 55. Then you're going to select worker 75, 95. Just like that until you have your what? your 300 workers in the what? In the sample. Okay, so advantage of this method is that it is easy to implement. Okay, it's very easy to implement this method here. Okay, and then a disadvantage, we can say, um, one of the disadvantages is that it can introduce biasness if maybe the list has patterns that align with uh, that do not align with maybe the sampling interval. Okay, so that's it about this question here. So any questions?
So I have a question.
Yes, what's your question?
What if you pick number 6,000? So how are you going to be adding that 20?
Okay, so if you pick 6,000 here, then it means when you add this, when you add 20 to this 6,000, you are going to go uh, 20 steps from this, because this 6,000 is the last number, right? So when you add 20 to this, it means your next number will be what? Will be 20, because this is the last number. So if we add 20 here, it means we have to go back to the start here. Okay, so we start adding, we add 20 numbers from the beginning here. Okay, so it means your next number will be 20 and then 40, just like that.
Okay.
Yes. All right, guys, so any questions before we call it a day? All right, so if there are no questions, then I end here. Thank you so much for attending, and this marks our last free class for second semester courses. Okay, so for those who would like to continue learning with us, okay, you are welcome to register. Okay, you can inbox me on WhatsApp, and then I can send you the procedure that will get you registered, and you'll be enjoying our lessons. All right, so have a blessed evening, guys.